Glenna Sue Sharp moved from Connecticut to Keddie, California with her 5 kids, Sheila, John, Tina, Greg, and Rick Sharp, after leaving her abusive husband. They had originally lived in a small rental trailer in Quincy, owned by her brother, before they found a larger house in Keddie. The new home was a failed resort cabin that had been turned into long-term rental homes for low-income families. Sharp kept mostly to herself, as most of her neighbors described her as a loner, having only made friends with a single other person in the community. She was attending business classes at Feather River Community College, presumably to try and make a better living for herself and her children. On Saturday, April 11th, 1981, Sheila Sharp, Sue's daughter, slept over at the Seabolds' house, the neighboring house roughly 15 minutes away. The next morning at roughly 7 a.m., having forgotten her church clothes, she returned back to her house and was met with a grisly sight. Her mother, brother John, and brother's friend Dana Wingate were dead on the floor, covered in blood in the front room. Her brothers Rick and Greg, as well as their friend Justin, were found unharmed in the next room, presumably having slept through the incident. Sheila immediately fled and got the neighbors for help. The murders were notably vicious. 2 knives and a hammer were found on the scene. One of the knives was bent almost 30 degrees from use. Blood splatters indicated that the murders had all taken place in the living room. Sue was discovered on her side, nude from the waist down, with her own underwear taped to her mouth as a gag. She had been stabbed in the chest, her throat slit, and the side of her head bruised from blunt force trauma. John had his throat cut, and Dana had multiple head injuries, but it was determined that she died by asphyxiation. Tina, however, was nowhere to be found, and was presumed to be abducted. In the meantime, one of the neighbors, Justin, was questioned while under hypnosis, but the questioning was full of leading questions and extremely unreliable. One of the possible suspects was Marty Smart. He reportedly had terrible anger problems, and admitted that he had once tried to run over his own wife and son with a truck. However, he was questioned once, released, and never questioned again. He moved to Reno, then Oregon, where he eventually died of cancer-related issues. Marty's wife alleges that she found Tina's bloody jacket in their house, which was also never logged by the police, and there was no evidence one way or another. He also reportedly admitted to the murders twice, once in a therapy session where the authorities were contacted, but no report was made, and a second time when he stated, "I've paid the price of your love, and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives." However, this letter was also never filed as evidence, and it was later found out that he was personal friends with the local sheriff. The second potential suspect was Joe Bobidet, a friend of Marty's who had been living in his house. Bo had supposedly had a crush on Sue, who had rejected him multiple times. The night of the murder, he, Marilyn, and Marty were seen at a bar. But later, Bo and Marty were seen in the same bar wearing suits, as if they had wanted to be seen. Bobidet also told authorities that he had worked as an officer and that Marilyn was his niece, both of which were untrue. Despite the holes in his stories, the police let him go. It was later discovered that Bo had a criminal record and was allegedly an enforcer in the mafia, but he was still never investigated. John Bobidet then left Keddie and returned to Chicago, where he died in 1988. 3 years later, on April 22, 1984, the final victim would be found. A man named Ronald Pedrini was scouring the woods collecting cans when he found a human skull and jaw around 90 miles southwest of Keddie. Initially, investigators thought it was just a Native American remains, until an anonymous person called the sheriff's office, reporting it to be Tina Sharp's remains. 2 months later, forensic analysis confirmed this call. In the woods by her body, officers recovered a pair of jeans with a missing back pocket, a blue jacket, a blanket, and an empty surgical tape dispenser. None of it helped determine who killed her or how. That is until 2018, when a piece of tape from the crime scene was found to have DNA evidence matching that of a living suspect. But after that, that's all there is to it. Most suspected the true murderer was Marty, and that he got away with it till he died. But the revelations from 2018 seem to support otherwise. Perhaps the real murderer is still out there today, waiting to be found.